it took me a while to come out as being gay. You look at Pride alone, and I was only the other day talking about the man, twerking in his underpants in front of children. These are the sort of things that actually, normal young gay people who just want to be themselves and tell people about who they are and who they love, are fearful, becoming more and more fearful, I suspect, of coming out for these exact same reasons. We're doing absolutely zero justice to those kids.
Hello and welcome to Reasoned UK. If you enjoy today's content, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Now folks, here at Reasoned UK, we pride ourselves on, being reasonable. We can't help but scratch our heads when it comes to the never-ending quest for so-called full equality. Now don't get us wrong, we're all for progress and ensuring that everyone can live their lives without discrimination, but seriously, haven't we come a long way already? You'd think that this country was some swivel-eyed, bigoted island these days for believing in scientific reason and immutable fact. I mean, let's take a stroll down memory lane. Back in 1967 that is, they decriminalised homosexuality in England, and that was a massive step forward, and rightly so. Then in 2000, they went and equalised the age of consent. Bravo. Absolutely bravo. And hold your horses, because in 2004, we had the Civil Partnership Act, as well as the Gender Recognition Act, giving same-sex couples legal recognition. Surely they're landmark moments. But wait for it. Drum roll, please. In 2013, a Conservative government brought about the grand finale, same-sex marriage. That's a Hollywood-worthy happy ending, surely. But why then are these activists demanding more and more? Because let's be honest, dedicating an entire month to Pride so-called celebrations seems tad excessive to most of us. Shouldn't we be focusing on real issues facing every community in Britain, like the economy, healthcare, education, building, I dare say, a few damn homes? Why is support for acceptance of gay relationships apparently in decline? Maybe, just maybe, it's because a line has been crossed with gender ideology in our schools. With drag queen story times, drag queens teaching children how to twerk, and content that isn't age appropriate, now reaching those barely old enough to read and write, never mind understand themes like sex and gender. Now, I'm not saying prejudice has already disappeared. I'm sure there are many that believe I'm destined for the deepest, darkest pit of hell. But then, do these things, like trans and gender ideology, have anything at all to do with being gay or bisexual? Has pride gone too far? Are there now more red flags from a pride parade than a Jeremy Corbyn rally? Well, joining me to discuss and attempt to make sense out of the nonsense that has been Pride Month is the common sense crusader, Alex Armstrong. Alex, hello. Thank you for your time.
Hey Darren, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, Alex, did you see that the Bank of England, they've been actually spending a hell of a lot of time, I'd assume, writing a 103-page submission to Stonewall, which is, of course, the UK's foremost LGBT plus whatever it is these days charity. And they've actually submitted into this Stonewall charity's LGBT employers list. And they've said that people of any gender can be pregnant. And they've offered to help staff pay for gender reassignment treatment. I mean, Alex, I'm minded to say that they're well and truly taking the Michael with this one, because, I mean, it's at a time when people are worried about their mortgages. Is anyone remotely confident that inflation is coming down? Interest rates are shooting up alongside the nation's blood pressure. Am I alone in thinking that this is just deranged priorities?
You're absolutely not alone. In fact, I think the silent majority of LGBTQ whatever people actually agree with you, Darren. And, for me, this has become a question of, are we living in a privileged society now, being gay or lesbian or queer or trans, whatever you want to call yourself? It seems to me that the rules are being written for us with normal, hardworking people who don't identify with their sexuality. Mostly straight people just don't really care about who you sleep with and what you identify as. And so now they're having all these ideological, woke mind virus type policies forced upon them, where we're getting special treatment and they're suffering and they're being forced to pay for these ridiculous personal operations to transform other people's lives. I mean, I think we're getting to beyond insanity at this point, Darren. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And, it just shows how far the ESG, diversity and inclusion agenda has actually gone, where you've even got the central bank, those in charge of the nation's finances, or rather the monetary policy behind them, who are concentrating on the issue of bloody trans. I mean, it just strikes me as totally deluded, frankly, and utterly nutty. Yeah. But you mentioned there that one word, queer. Now, personally, when I was at school, would be called queer. Now, it was always said in a derogatory fashion, if you're queer, you're an abnormality, you're not normal, you are something to be rejected and apart from society. Now, I always thought that gay equality was so that we could be as boring as everybody else in society, not to stand out like a queer sore thumb. I mean, do you take exception to that word, or do you accept it?
It makes me feel sick, Darren, because, I thought the whole point of the gay rights movement was to remove labels. There used to be a whole campaign called Ditch the Label. I vividly remember it, where gay people are part of society. They're just like you and me. And if anything, Pride shows this fetishization of gay and lesbian and the trans movement. It's actually making a mockery of all these rights that we've managed to, and all this equity we've built up with the public for the last 20 years. I actually think we're now heading in reverse. And you put up a really interesting tweet not that long ago that showed actually gay acceptance is actually at a 20-year low, I think it was, taking us all the way back to the early 2000s. And I just, how much more damage are they going to do? Now forcing people to address them with their pronouns. I mean, for God's sake, just let people call you whatever they want to. And if you politely ask them to change to say, actually, no, I identify as a woman, and they go, oh, okay, well, I'll do my best. Accept that, stop forcing society to behave the way that you want it to, and try to fit in a little bit better.
I mean, it's not just the Bank of England, though, because the BBC have announced an 8-part drama called What It Feels Like for a Girl. Now, it's somewhat ironic a title because it's based on a part memoir, part novel by Paris Lees. Now, for those that don't know, Paris Lees is a trans woman. Now, I've actually got an anecdote with Paris Lees. I once did a debate with Paris, and I will use she, her pronouns just to be polite. Now, Paris said to me, why are you arguing about conservative ideas? And I was only about 21 at the time, or 21, 22. And she said, you should be out doing drugs. And I thought, oh, how lovely. But Paris is a biological man, trans woman. Now, my first question from that, Alex, is how would Paris Lees know what it feels like for a girl? And why is the BBC so obsessed with this particular issue? It isn't just the Bank of England. This stuff is everywhere.
It is everywhere, you're right. And I don't know how they would identify and feel like what it is to be a woman. And I think a lot of women are worried that their rights are being slowly transformed into sort of pseudo-male rights in this odd, bizarre, society we live in today. It's pretty striking that you can't even speak out against this stuff. And I look at the vicar that recently questioned all the pride flags and all the over wokeness and at their bank, and had their bank account shut down. The same's happening to other politicians and people who speak out. And we're sort of moving into this weird CCP-like society, but sort of almost seems worse. In CCP, at least you've got your social credit score. I don't even know what my social credit score even is.
I can't imagine mine's very high. But I was struck by, I want to show you this because Graham Norton has been quite vocal in coming out for the trans community. And he's been quite critical of the likes of J.K. Rowling, who, as you know, has been at the forefront really of the debate, arguing that in trying to be inclusive of trans, we're actually being exclusive of women. Now, in this piece, he talks about how he says, I was a very effeminate little boy. He says, I was kind of aware of it. I knew that was my job, not to get bullied, because I remember it was so obvious. I remember my parents sending this little Faye thing. I wore my sister's clothes. I still wet the bed. Off to primary school, age 4. They must have thought, what's going to come back? Some blood on a stick. This is all that remains. Now, of course, Graham Norton isn't now living life as a trans individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is an openly gay man who is perfectly, as far as I'm aware, comfortable in his gender identity, if we want to use those watchwords of the moment, and wasn't sent off by his parents to be experimented on as a child because he was an effeminate young man. Do you see where I'm going with this? There is a real inconsistency with those who attack someone like J.K. Rowling, but say themselves, I was either a tomboy as a child or I was an effeminate young lad as a child. And then once puberty happens, you grow out of that. It's part of being a child,
Exactly. I mean, what happened to the innocence of children, for God's sake? I mean, we're telling parents they should put their kids on puberty blockers because their kid might want to play with a Barbie doll for 10 minutes or wear women's shoes. I mean, how many photos people have got as kids and perfectly straight men as children wearing their mum's shoes? I mean, for God's sake, where's it going to end? I think this is what everyone's worried about. Is this going to keep on being forced down my throat to the extent where I'm going to be told that I'm a child abuser because I'm not giving my child puberty blockers? I mean, this is getting out of hand. It really, really is.
Yeah, because I don't know what your view is, but my view is I'm absolutely crystal clear that no child should ever be experimented on in this way.
Yeah, I think if any parent does this to their child under the age of 18, they should be put in prison, frankly. I think it's that simple. There's plenty of things people can't do until they're 18 years old. Voting, drinking, going out, partying, joining the military. Why is this any different? And this is a life-changing decision that you cannot reverse very easily.
Absolutely. We don't allow kids to get a tattoo, but we're more than willing to allow them to get a mastectomy. It is totally grim. Do you think the trans movement itself is anti-gay? And what I mean by that is, when you hear someone saying that it's transphobic if someone doesn't want to shag a trans man or trans woman. Now, Stonewall, as I already mentioned, the UK's biggest LGBT charity, they've actually redefined or are attempting to redefine homosexual to mean gender attracted, which I think is in a very similar vein to the idea that, you're transphobic if you don't want to shag a trans man or trans woman, because you shouldn't view it like that. You're gender attracted, not sex attracted. It is all about the assault, the assassination of sex itself.
It is. Yeah, and what's fascinating about the whole thing, to me, it seems like the gay community we've got our rights. We're pretty much equals under law with everybody else. And so it's now like, what else can we do to get attention? It's very narcissistic. This whole thing is like, we want more. We want to change the definition of this. We want to do. It's like, I can't keep up every week with what definition, what they've added to the LGBTQI alphabet soup rubbish, the next community. It's like, how can this one group of people be so all-encompassing of so many different things, and therefore they get pressure from all these other people that are joining to say, well, you need to change the definition of that. It's not inclusive. Well, how can you be inclusive to such a broad range of opinions? You just can't. That's why political parties exist. There's not one political party that runs the whole country, because that would be, again, China. It's all sounding very much like what the Chinese are doing with their social credit system, but on a way more woke basis.
Yeah, the idea that there's an LGBTQ plus two spirits penguin, whatever it is these days, community. It is as nonsensical an idea as saying that there is an entire female community. The idea that females themselves are some homogenous mass that all have the same views and opinions and values in life. It is just an inherently stupid thing to say. Now,
Darren, like, and I've said this a few times, and it took me a while to come out as being gay, and one of the things that really got to me was this labeling, was this constant forcing of this fetishization of gay people. I mean, you look at Pride alone, and I was only the other day talking about the man, twerking in his underpants in front of children. These are the sort of things that actually, normal young gay people who just want to be themselves and tell people about who they are and who they love, are fearful, becoming more and more fearful, I suspect, of coming out for these exact same reasons. We're doing absolutely zero justice to those kids that really do just want to live an ordinary life. They have to come into this community, and if you don't go into this community, then you're washed out. You're not let into gay bars, as you may know, Darren. You're kicked out of the street of the gay.
Well, I was just about to say, actually, that far from being inclusive, because these are the watchwords that these people always say, inclusive, we're all one diverse community, yada, 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 until you have an opinion that says that actually biological sex exists, or, we're not part of some homogenous mass, or actually just because I like blokes doesn't mean that I agree with your left-wing politics, or the left own me as an individual, and so on and so forth. So much so that, when I said, and you're right to point out, in a gay bar, a drag queen, Alex, asked me, what do you do? It was basically, they were flirting with me to start off with, right? And I thought, well, you're on a hiding to nothing, but I'll entertain you. And they said, he said, I should say, he says, well, what do you do? Who do you work for? And I said, I work for GB News. And then as soon as it came out of my mouth, I thought, that's it. I'm in for a world of pain now. No sooner than I'd said it, this drag queen flounces over to the security guy and says, he's bigoted, he's got views that are making people uncomfortable, he's going to have to leave. And that was it. I hadn't done anything. I'd had one drink, so I wasn't, totally pissed and going off it at anyone. It was just, it shows the intolerance of this movement. And actually, if you're not the right kind of gay, and that's what I hear more than any other, then you are totally excluded. So far from being inclusionary, again, they are holistically exclusionary.
Absolutely. There's been many occasions where, even just when I was dating, being on Tinder, for example, and gay guys being on there going, oh, what do you do?
Sure, it was Tinder.
Let's not get into that on this. We'll push that to a private conversation, Darren. But, you just get so much abuse. And, the whole point of starting a rights movement is so you can have the freedom to say and do the things that everyone else does. And now this whole thing has come a complete 180 and gone, well, actually, no, we're not going to let you say things that we deem not to be inclusive, which is the exact opposite of what it actually means. They've managed to create a double meaning of inclusive here. So, I sympathise with all the gay people out there who just want to live a normal life and just say what they want to say and live in a free society like the one we should be living in today.
Exactly, because straight people, don't go about their daily business and have other straight people assume that they've all got the same view. So why should it be accepted and a common perception that all gay people have the same view? I find that a deeply homophobic idea. It's deeply homophobic.
It's the same with types. You may like a different type of person. I know I saw recently online a trans person saying if you're straight and you don't find a trans woman attractive, you're transphobic.
Yeah.
I mean, what world
happens all the time.
It's crazy. So the social justice warriors that have completely dominated the the opinion pieces of the world, or the guardians of the world today, are really doing a hell of a lot more damage than they think they are. I'm sure some of their intentions are good, and I'm all for everyone having equal rights, but I'm also all for everyone having an equal opportunity to say what they want to say and get their opinion heard. That's the beauty of living in a country like Britain.
So, are you a member of the Conservative Party?
I'm unfortunately still a member. Yeah.
So, are you a member of LGBT
No.
plus Conservatives or whatever it is? No. Why?
No. And I know some of our mutual friends are going to be really say this.
Albie, who I can say that I can say this publicly. It's Albie, who I do. Albie is involved with LGBT conservatives, and I also do the Saturday Five with him on GB News. So people will be aware if they watch both things that I don't agree with Albie. Yeah. And yes, exactly.
I mean, I think for me, the problem with these groups, every time I go to an event, or I go, and I've said this to Albie as well, I've told him personally, the problem I have with going to these events is that they've got a pledge card out. They pledge to be an ally. I mean, for God's sake, stop it. Let's talk about what the issues are that are actually facing gay people. And, they go there and it's all this like, oh, we endorse you as the gay community to be our candidate. And it's just a load of rubbish, isn't it? It's like, you should be talking about policies. You should be talking about how we create an equal society, and then fighting back where you see that inequality starting to drift off. That's the point of these groups, not to sit there and start endorsing candidates like there's some sort of selection committee,
Yeah.
And a lot of them are just going to these things to get a leg up in politics. Then, and again, I'm going to not make any friends by saying this. A lot of them use this to go, I'm gay. I can get on that shortlist a little bit.
It's true. Right? It's using the left's identity politics to their own advantage, and I think that's a dangerous game, because it is basically, I guess it's biting the hand that feeds you, because this beast is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's why the likes of the Bank of England and all this ESG stuff and diversity and inclusion stuff is taken off, because there are so-called conservatives who are using it to their own advantage as well.
Quite right. And yeah, they know how to play the system, and people love playing the system. What happens to fair and square? I don't ever want to get a job because of my sexuality. Never. I mean, I know that there's people who don't want to get their job. I always say, would you like to have got your job based on your race? Would you have liked to got your job based on your sexuality? Absolutely not. If I said you weren't the best candidate, but you were the only gay one, I would feel horrendous. And I feel this about the shortlist, and I've seen the Conservative Party doing this now. It's taking that same, as you said, that same left-wing ideology and applying it to what should be a free market, best ideas wins competition. But now, just because you're gay, you're getting to become an MP a lot quicker.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can have diversity of everything, it seems, but not the diversity of thought. But Alex, I wonder. I think the reason I'm so passionate about highlighting the anti-women aspect of this movement is because, my entire life, the foundations of it have always been centered around women. And women have shaped and molded me into the beast from the northeast that I am today. But, I find it deeply troubling what's going on when the NHS speaks of chest feeding instead of breastfeeding. It's pregnant people instead of, women, mothers, and people who menstruate. Now, I don't know if you saw it as well, but ITV had an interview with a woman on the cost of living crisis, and they used a trans woman. Now, this trans woman also posted a tweet containing a photograph in which she was holding a child in a sort of breastfeeding pose. And I mean, that's what chest feeding ought to be, because I tell you what, I'm no biologist, but there isn't a breast there, right? That kid can suck for days as long as hard as it wants, Alex, and nothing is going to happen there. I mean, if you ask me, this is utterly, I'm going to swear, utterly fucked. And someone actually ought to intervene for this poor child. Is this part of an anti-women agenda as well as just plain wrong?
But I'm not going to chuck the whole trans community into that and say that they all are, because I know they're not. But there clearly is a group of trans people, the same as there are a group of gay people on the left as well, who are pushing this agenda. And frankly, I mean, just to talk about that individual who was chest feeding, that's child abuse, in my opinion. That is child abuse. If there were photos of that of a normal looking bloke doing that and saying, look at me with my kid doing this, I think someone will report them to the police. And so, what's the difference? As you said, there's no biological benefit from this child doing that at all. We're also getting into the territory. Is this person got mental health issues? Are they fit to have a child in the first place? Women's rights are being attacked, and you see it with people like J.K. Rowling standing up for women, and being absolutely taken down. Even companies like, I think it was Oxfam, put that horrendous looking picture that very similar to her up. Just because she's saying that this is women's rights here. If we start allowing women to compete in sport, trans women to compete in sport, where does it end? Women will never win anything. So, there's inclusive, and then there's also trans people having to understand that biologically they are not the same. Well,
I think they do understand that, Alex, but I think, frankly, I'm going to say the unsayable. I think some of them are doing it deliberately. Right, they weren't very successful as men, so therefore, why not get one up on the women?
Well, if that's the case, it's extremely sad state of affairs for your personal life. I mean, I think there's great things about being a man, and there's great things about being a woman, but
because even if things like access to single-sex spaces, I've seen videos of a bloke dressed as a woman with an erection in a changing room. How the hell have we ended up in this scenario where we're saying that man has a right to be there and that man is part of an equality agenda?
Yeah, I mean, it's the infiltration of these, maybe going back to what we were talking about slightly before, is like allowing people to get the job just because they look a certain way or identify as trans. We need a trans person to work here. We need a gay person to work here. Well, actually, a lot of those times, those people carry this ideology with them and start implementing things. I've been in, my career has been mostly in tech for the last 10 years, and I've been fighting the woke mind virus in culture.
You'll never work again now, Alex. When this goes out, you'll never work again.
I'll shut my bank accounts down probably. I'll see you.
I shouldn't laugh, actually, because it's deadly serious, but yeah.
They do infiltrate companies, and they do start putting out things like, I mean, there's some great memes out there, but they do start saying things like, you can't say, hey guys, or it's like, who cares? We're here to do a job.
Yeah.
But, enforcing gender neutral toilets is one thing I've stopped in many companies and said, I don't want this. And I've managed to speak to some of the women in the company and get them to speak up. But a lot of them are very afraid. Straight people are very afraid they're going to be deemed transphobic or homophobic and simply get arrested. They really are.
I mean, hilariously, GB News actually has gender-neutral toilets. But the gender-neutral toilets are pre-existing. They were there before GB News moved in, thank God. But, another thing I was struck over this last month of Pride was the Pride parade being blocked by Just Spoilt Brats, also known as Just Stop Oil. Yeah. And the wokies, Alex, must have had some serious mental arithmetic going on here, because there's some real identity politics somersaults. Who on earth do they back? Do they back the Greta Doomsday cult or the clown flag parade? There must have been, I'd love to have known what was going on within the heads of the people actually on the parade themselves. I mean, do you think, which one do you support, if any?
None of them. I would have quite happy the whole circus just imploded in itself. I think everyone would have applauded, even if they wouldn't have said it out loud. I mean, it's becoming beyond satire, isn't it? Like the left attacking the left. It's woke versus woke. I mean, I'm all up for watching that. I think it will be absolutely fascinating to see the woke wars continue, but against each other, as they now become even getting to the point where they start fighting each other on what policies they agree on and what definitions they agree on. But the Just Stop Oil people have a point, and it's a really interesting point. And I just want to make it quickly. That Pride is massively sponsored by these huge companies who don't give an absolute toss about LGBT issues 90% of the year. It's only this 1 month of the year that they seem to really care, by the way, guys, and that's because they're selling you merchandise and they're selling you that, we're good people. They're not doing it in Saudi Arabia. They're not doing it in China. So I think whilst, I don't agree with the point that they're making it's all about oil, they do put a spotlight on the fact that Pride is just a money-making scheme now.
Absolutely. Do you think this is how it's going to all end? The left will ultimately, and the identity politics poison that's running through much of the British state, do you think that actually this is what's going to end up happening? It will eat itself, the public will grow sick and tired, there's going to be a real pushback, and then what does that mean for gay acceptance? Do we start to see an even bigger rollback than the one you mentioned at the start of the recording?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the woke ideology, I think it will have its day, and I think it will be very much like the hippie movement and eventually start to filter out, and maybe the good parts of it will stay and linger on, but there's always going to be some people who hang on to hope that it will kick around. I do think we will see gay rights generally take a step backwards in the next few years, and I think that's sadly because of these people who are extremely on the left, and people do not want to have anything forced down their throat anymore. They're sick to death of it. They had 2 years of it with COVID, of the government telling them what to do. Now they're entering into an era where they're being told what to do by some random bloke wearing a dress on the street. It's getting beyond a joke. So I do think all of these things will have repercussions if the argument isn't fair. The public are really smart, and they are underestimated at every turn. They're always underestimated by Brexit's another great example of this, where the establishment told the public that they just didn't know what they're talking about. But it will always come back round when you push too hard, and I think we're pushing too hard.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that we need perhaps a little small war just to remind ourselves of what's important in life. So I'm actually personally of the view that we need to retake Calais whilst France is under this period of severe riots and all the rest of it. Whilst Macron's busy dealing with Paris burning, we can just have a quick little invasion into Calais, and then that solves the migrant issue. I think I'm onto something here.
Yeah, it's like Agincourt all over again. It might be the solution. Who knows?
Darren the Conqueror in reverse. There we are. That has a ring to it. Now, what would you like to see happen then to end? What would you like to see happen going forward? Because I'm reminded of Paul O'Grady, who, of course, in his alter ego, his drag persona, was Lily Savage. Now, Paul did an interview in 2017. He was obviously sadly no longer with us, but he did an interview in 2017, and it was with the BBC, and they were asking him about LGBT, whatever it is, and he said,
"Are your hopes for the LGBT community? Like, what would have been achieved?"
Well, for a start, we don't want any more letters of the alphabet adding to it. You know what I mean? I really find it quite irritating. And you get these sorts of 18-year-olds who are like, right on, and angst. And you think, oh, give over. Let's see if you feel so angst when you're 60, mate. You won't be.
So what would you prefer instead? For
it just to be a matter of fact, a way of life, without any prejudice. And without people sticking their nose in where it's not wanted.
So I agreed with Paul completely, and I'm surprised there wasn't a backlash to him saying it. But am I old before my time? And is that what an ideal world looks like, where we go back and do what Paul O'Grady wisely said and just take off all the attachments and just get back to, living our sodden lives?
I genuinely agree with him on 100% level, really do. And I think that it's the same for many of the problems that we face ideologically, whether it's race, whether it's gay rights, whatever it is. Removing the barriers and having an open conversation is actually what's going to change the world. Really, it's about putting aside our differences. Every successful equality movement has been able to get a message across to the broader public that we are the same as you. I mean, Martin Luther King fought for this for black rights in America. His whole premise was, we are the same people. We don't want to be split up and segregated. While this current ideological fad going on is doing the exact opposite. They want to be segregated. They want to have their own spaces. So, I really do think Paul O'Grady was right, and it's a shame to see that we are slowly reversing the opposite of his vision and becoming more segregated.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Well, Hopefully one day you'll be Prime Minister, mate, and we can forget about all of this nonsense. But until then...
I won't have a bank account by next week.
Oh, well, that's true. It's what the West needs. Alex Armstrong. Strong with Armstrong. There we are.
That's it. I love it. You've already got my campaign.
Sorted. That's you in. Number 10 beckons. Cheers for your time, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.